lights that they used to try and shoot down the aircraft, bounced them off the bottom of those clouds, because in the town of Sarlottern, the infantry would take a half a block, and then at night the Germans would come back and take it back again. So they thought if they had this artificial moonlight, they could control that.
Did they? Did it work?
I don't know. I mean, we don't know what works or what doesn't work. We ended up clearing out the town. Then toward the end of the war, we had something called task forces. We were trying to keep pressure on the Germans. They were retreating. We'd have a platoon of tanks, which was 2 tanks, the tank commander's jeep, then my jeep with the company commander, 2 cannons, a 2.5-ton truck full of infantrymen, and infantrymen riding on the trucks. And we would come to a roadblock in the town, and as soon as we would kill the SS, they would give up, because they were mostly 15, 16-year-old kids or old men. And as soon as the SS trooper was removed, they would be ready to surrender. So we did that quite a while. We would run till we ran out of gas, and then they'd bring at night they'd bring up a 2.5-ton truck full of gas, pour it into these tanks, 5-gallon cans at a time, and we'd repeat this the next day. No food. But we soon learned where the Germans buried their potatoes. You could always see a hump. And we started digging up potatoes. We'd raid the hen houses. 3 or 4 potatoes, no kidding, 15, 20 eggs for a meal, and that was what we ate. We didn't know about cholesterol, that we were worried about. But we lived that way for quite a while. Patton would send you gas, but he wouldn't send you food. One time when we were following these task forces, I would keep the jeep's wheel in the tank track, but the tank tracks were a lot wider, so I could only put 1 wheel in the tank track. The jeep in front of me hit a mine. It blew it right up on the back of the tank. And I just, we weren't allowed to stop. They had medics for to help people that were injured, and we pulled around and went right on. But that was the 3rd time I really had a close call. The captain used to kid me. He knew I didn't drink, I didn't smoke. I was an oddball, He were, no, he didn't. And he said, "Do you think you'd have the nerve to shoot a German if he was coming at us?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure. You fire that thing, it's not very personal. It leaves, and whether it kills somebody, you don't know." So we had been on this task force. We had some machine gun fire going overhead, and we were kind of nervous. And the column stopped, and we saw some movement up in the woods. So we all got out and we started firing. There must have been 20 of us fired at this person in the woods. But he was out of range, we weren't hitting him. And somebody with better brains than the rest of us had ceased fire and sent a jeep up. It was a 14-year-old kid. So we're really glad we didn't hit him. But the captain said after that, he says, "I guess you'd shoot a German if he was coming." We finally got to the Rhine River, and there we had a little song we used to sing. "I don't want no bacon, I don't want no bacon, all I want's a piece of the Rhine." And we crossed the Rhine River on a floating bridge. I have a picture of a floating bridge there too. And it was the first time I really saw German aircraft, and we saw the Messerschmitt twin-engine jet for the first time. Only I didn't know it was a jet. I mean, you couldn't see a propeller or a propeller plane anyhow. I just thought it was a twin-engine plane. But we had pretty accurate anti-aircraft fire. They had half-track with 450 caliber synchronized, and if they come down diving, those guys knock them right out of the air. Later on, we were clearing the Autobahn, and I come across an airplane. And I thought, geez, there must be a factory around here. I'm looking for a factory. It turned out it was one of these jets, and I thought there was a factory because it had no propellers. I had no idea that there was such a thing as a jet. funny on Easter Sunday, and my wife will laugh at Easter Sunday, because whenever we go to a reunion, we fight Easter Sunday over and over again. We were on a task force, stopped at a roadblock, and it was dark, and they said, well, we'll just stay here. So most of the men just slept in a ditch on the side of the road. There was a barn a little bit ahead. I went up there with a couple of guys, and we got up on the second floor of the barn. The officers, they went in the house that went with the barn. And in the morning, just across a little valley, the Germans were in the woods, and they started firing on us. They had a couple of self-propelled guns. And so the fellow out in the barn, we had a radio, and we were radioing our guns, and we were firing back. And they shot, it must have been armor piercing, because it went right through the barn without exploding. But HE would have exploded. So we got the heck out of that barn. But that's another time I almost got it. So the captain come after me, and we got the Jeep turned around. We were towing the trailer. A fellow named Cliff Guernsey had his truck hit. He didn't have anything to ride, so I laid on my trailer. My Jeep had already been hit in the bumper and the radiator. I tied 2 cans of sea rations under the hood and tied it down, hoping it would be an air scoop and cool the engine. And Jim was laughing. It didn't work.
It works.
So we took off. We were being fired at by snipers. The corporal, Paul, got hit in the shoulder. He was sitting in the back of me in the Jeep. Guernsey got hit in the stomach. He was laying on our trailer. I ran the Jeep until my engine froze. We were out of danger. I took Guernsey's first aid packet first and opened it up. And they had this sulfur powder. I sprinkled that on his wound. Couldn't give him the pills because if you got hit in the stomach, you're not allowed to drink water or anything. Tied the bandage, turned him over to tie it, and he had a hole that big in his back where it came out. So then I took my bandage, sprinkled that, tied him up. We sent him back on we had Jeeps with litters on them, sent him back on a litter Jeep. For 15 years, I never knew what happened to that guy. And he walked into a reunion. He'd become a school teacher and taught school. And he just died in 1993. But that was a real thrill for me to see that guy. The whole time he's laying on that Jeep, he's saying to the captain, am I going to die? Am I going to die? Am I going to die? Well, we kept telling him he was going to be all right, but we sure didn't know. That was quite a thrill. We got credit for knocking out 3 of the guns on that expedition. But they hit one of our guns again, and Sergeant Cross and Jim Bitterman were good friends of mine, both got killed. And Jim Bitterman is a good example of what's wrong with war. He was a brilliant guy. If you were writing a letter home, didn't know how to spell a word, you could ask Jim Bitterman, he would know. But he was really a knowledgeable guy. Probably not more than 21. I think he'd had 1 year of college. His mother wouldn't believe he was dead, and she wrote to Captain Fowler, I don't know how many letters, and he personally answered every letter, but she just couldn't believe that he was killed in combat. She wanted to know, how did he really die? How did he really die? And we visited his grave in southern France, and his mother never brought him home. Which I couldn't understand after all the fuss she made, and she didn't bring him home. I got here April 2nd, 45, which was near the end of the war. A couple of fellows in our OP got killed. And then we had some things. Nothing's exactly funny in war, but if you didn't have a sense of humor and maybe a belief in God, you were probably not going to make it through that war with any kind of stability in your brain. And this German patrol come through, and we had some barbed wire in front of us. They crawled over, and one of our truck drivers named Shat called them, halt, give the password, and they didn't give the password. And they turned around and started going back over the wire. And he shot one over right in the rear, just like in the Laurel and Hardy movie. And we had a big time over that. Of course, he stopped down and we took him prisoner. You know, all kinds of things happen. The Germans were really starting to surrender. And Captain Fowler, he always had to be up with the line companies. And we were back at our headquarters, going up toward the line. And we come through this little town that had recently been liberated. And he says, "Stop, stop. I think I saw a couple guys over in these woods. There's woods on this side, woods on that side." So he jumps out of the Jeep and takes my rifle. Because he only had a pistol. He had a .45, like the one on the table. He leaves me sitting in the Jeep. 3 Germans come out of these woods toward me. I don't have a rifle. I don't have anything. I am scared. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do is fake it. So I get out of the Jeep. I walk up to the bunker and I wait for them. And they come. I don't speak German. They tell them to put their weapons down, and they did. Captain Fowler come out with 2 more. Now we had 7 to get in this Jeep. We always had our windshields down. And we put 2 in the front, squeezed 3 in the back, and we took them back, turned them in. Later in the war, when I lifted my windshield, they busted both sides of my windshield and sitting on it. That was a scary, but I don't consider that as a dangerous situation, because the Germans were trying to surrender to us rather than to the Russians. And then finally we ended up in a concentration camp called KC Lager. The 11th Armored got all the credit in any history book you want to read. You could go there, they made a memorial on the plaque says 11th Armored, but 104th Infantry was riding on the 11th Armored trucks. And they wanted to get the prisoners out as fast as they could. And we emptied our ammunition trucks, and our truck drivers took the prisoners out. And they didn't want to leave. They were afraid the Germans were going to come back and punish them if they left. And they would come up to us and want to hug us. And I can't describe how they looked. I don't know if Alice and Bill saw some of the pictures when they were over there. But just skin stretched on bones. And just the most horrible thing we could see. And we were there just about 2 hours after the tankers liberated the place. Then we turned north toward Czechoslovakia to meet the Russians. We met them in a town called Czech Budějovice, which is the home of Budweiser. And we weren't supposed to be there. Eisenhower and Stalin had decided the Americans would stop here and the Russians would stop there. And so we had to quick get out of there and let the Russians come in. And we were near Pilsen. So the war was over about the next day. And we sent a 1.5-ton truck up to Pilsen Brewery. I was a designated driver way back in 1945. We had designated drivers. We go into the Pilsen Brewery and these enormous tanks, like, you know, maybe you've seen them in breweries, they still have them today, 2 stories tall or whatever they are. The GIs didn't know how to get the beer out. Bang, they hit them with the M1 over canteen cups. When we left that brewery, there was about 3 inches of beer on the floor. They filled the truck up. They found other things, bottled liquor and stuff like that. So I'm driving them back. And we take a wrong turn, we end up in a Russian roadblock. So I thought, oh man, because the Russians, they didn't treat the Americans any better than they did the Germans. So 2 of our designated drunks got out and started drinking with the Czech Russian. Gave them a couple of bottles, got them drunk, and then they let us go. We went on our way. So we did have some interesting things. Then we were stationed in Linz, Austria. We were on one side of the bridge, and the Russians were on another. And one of their men came over in the night, I guess, drunk, and one of our guards shot him. Call the Russians and say, you know, what should we do with it? They say, you shot him, you bury him. That was the Russians' attitude toward life. That's why sometimes we can't understand how other people feel about life.